Well, if we are symbiotic with AI, where there's this essentially a merger of human and machine intelligence, then we may be able to address the relevance question. And the best thing I could come up with is that you have interwoven human and machine intelligence, and got something like Neuralink to augment human intelligence and improve the symbiosis with AI, that we effectively become maybe one with the AI.
Religion you're allowed to do anywhere.
No, miss, you're not allowed to sing church songs outside of church grounds.
Yeah, these motherfuckers are pushing digital ID on these people. And once they do digital ID, they're going to attach it to a social credit score.
Yep.
They're going to attach it to a carbon footprint score. And then they'll be able to control your movement and control you entirely. And most importantly, they've already arrested 12,000 people for social media posts.
That's insane.
Above and beyond every other country. Way above Russia. Russia was like 400 last year. The UK is 12,000.
Some people believe that you are an alien.
I am an alien.
You are. Now you are uncovered.
Yes. I keep telling people I'm an alien, but nobody believes me.
The mass immigration's not an accident. If I was going to destroy a country, I would do it exactly the way they're doing it. I'd take away their freedom, take away their ability to protest, take away their guns, which they did in the 90s, and then you start tightening that noose.
Is anybody else experiencing the whiplash of watching all of this crazy shit that's happening lately? And then you go to work and you're around a bunch of people who very clearly don't pay attention to anything, and they just don't care or don't talk about any of it. It's kind of crazy.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. We're going out of the matrix into prime reality. Thank you so much for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube. Our wonderful moderators, I think Ronnie isn't here today, but two steps behind, aka Raymond. Thank you for your wonderful work, brother. Our brother from Norway. And of course, my wonderful wife, Christine, as the wise thumbs, also just tuned in. Thank you for being here. Let's dive into it. So this show is for you if you value freedom and sovereignty over comfort and convenience. If comfort and convenience are most important to you, this probably won't be for you, and that is okay. We're talking about the 7 essential things that are needed to live sovereignly outside of the system, and specifically looking at the very fast tightening grip of the digital control system. This is not theory. These are the things that we have talked about in various forms, but never in this compact version. So please save this, share this, like this, comment, and share this with your friends and family. Really important. So we have studied off-grid living for a long time, outside of the systems, and all the components that might be needed. Here is the why. For people who want to live a life where their mind is free, where their body is free, where their spirit is free, and where they can take care of themselves, their families, their loved ones without relying on the system, life within the system becomes impossible now. We're now in the beginning stages of the full digital control grid, digital ID, central bank digital currencies, social credit score, restrictive movements, potential climate lockdowns. These are all realities that are unfolding in the system. However, That's not the only way to go. There are other ways to go. And we're going to talk about what is actually needed for strong, thriving communities to live outside of the grid. Okay, so here we go. Like I said, please save this. Please make sure you got this. So the number one thing that most of these communities, I mean, like the Amish, they're built around, of course, their religion, but most other communities sort of overlook this one thing that might be more important than the others, which is to have a spiritual foundation and a moral code. In other words, the reason why our society currently, like the mainstream society, is failing and crumbling apart because that isn't in place anymore. Not to say that the previous spiritual foundation and moral code were ideal or great, but there was something there, and there's nothing there right now. The optimal spiritual foundation and moral code is truth. So when people are aligned with the quest and finding of truth and living it, well, that's the optimal. But every civilization, every tribe, every kin's domain, whatever, there must be a shared story. And like I said, ideally that story is true or as close to the truth as possible. And there must be a clear alignment on the fundamental principles. How do we view our relationship with source, with the creator, if you will? How do we view our relationship with nature? Who are we in this equation? And I'm not saying I'm telling you what that needs to be. What I'm saying is that the fundamentals should align. Why? Imagine a community of, let's say, 30, 40, 50 families. So that's, I don't know, 200, 300 people, depending. And you do not have fundamental alignment of fundamental morals. Can you imagine how that's going to play out? That's going to be basically whatever we view in mainstream society in a very small, compact version. So not good. Very important. Where that is not in place, communities fall apart because, see, most people get into the off-grid or self-sustainable lifestyle from a survival standpoint. They look at society the way that it's now. They don't fit in. They have a certain sense of urgency. Then they go and maybe find a community, and they establish survival. They have their needs met. But now when your needs are met, you come out of survival mode and you go into normal mode. Normal mode means you want to live, and you want to live well. So now you're amongst people and you take a closer look, and they don't even have a moral code, or it's very, very fluid. And so then this falls apart because people get greedy, get selfish, and these communities fall apart. So the spiritual and moral foundation is incredibly important. And it's the number one thing that people should talk about when they are, sort of starting to work together is, do we have shared values? Really, really important. The second thing, this is most people, again, they will step out of these communities or out of mainstream society, and they will find land maybe and start a homestead and do that. And that can work. Don't get me wrong. There are isolated homesteaders that live like that all their lives. But the chance of survival and building this for the long run, it increases exponentially when you have community, when you have clan, when you have family. And when I talk about family here, I honor every kind of relationship that people want to be in, as long as it's consensual and among adults, right? So that's all good and well. But the only, and I want to stress this, the only model, it's not a model, it's what nature prescribes. The only thing that will allow humanity to exist, moving forward in perpetuity, is nature's nuclear family. It's a man and a woman and them having children. That's the family I talk about. It's not to exclude anyone or deny them their right of being the way that they are. Everybody is, like I said, live however you want to live as long as it's consensual. However, when we look at this, not to state the obvious, but if you build a community of same-sex partnerships, well, that's the last generation of that community. because they can't procreate naturally, right? So the model, the ideal naturally needs to be what nature prescribes, which is a man and a woman. That's the family unit. And then the clans around it, multi-generational households. These are things that have been strong and have proven, because it's nature's way, have proven that this is what will sustain us. But then you also have, when you have families that are actually tight knit and live in close proximity and together, or share land or whatever, you have division of labor, you have support. It takes a village to raise children. It was never meant to be just a couple doing it alone. You have grandparents, you have uncles, you have aunts, everybody becomes part of the family. And also a decision-making system like a council, right? Again, that's based on these moral values and spiritual values that we talked before. But that's really important. It needs to be there. And so this is, once again, we're talking about building structures that are not temporary. They're not about survival. Simply, they're about creating something that functions and can sustain itself outside of mainstream systems. No supermarkets where you don't know where your food comes from. No reliance on other infrastructures. It's where communities build their own essentials. Tribes, clans, families. That is the strongest, absolutely strongest. And it's also in terms of, and we're going to get to that, in terms of defense, you defend your family with more conviction, power, strength than you would anything else in the world. There's nothing that is more powerful than your own instinct to defend your family, to defend those who are closest to you. So this is also a protection, in the strongest sense. But naturally, it's about culture, children, love, community. That's what we're designed to be. The third thing, also missed by a lot of people, it's knowledge, skills, and generational transmission of those knowledge and skills. So you can have land, you can have community, but if the next generation isn't educated, isn't brought up, doesn't know what it's about, doesn't learn the skills, then you lose everything, which is what has happened in our society, right? Our great-grandparents, many of them knew about medicinal herbs. They knew about home remedies, they knew about all these things, and then that got lost because that knowledge wasn't transported any longer. So we need to build into these communities a knowledge transfer system. It doesn't have to be the traditional school system, which is, it's primitive. It's stupid, actually. It doesn't work well. There are other ways of learning, but children need to be brought up in that knowledge. They need to have access to elders who can share not just skills and knowledge, but wisdom, right? Teaching how to think, not necessarily what to think. The storytelling, the what are our traditions? Where does our family come from? All of these things matter greatly and should be included if you want to build something long-term. Then clearly, and this is something that is so misunderstood or not understood at all, is bodily and mental sovereignty. And here we're going into a field that is rapidly evolving. Thankfully, we're gaining knowledge about this every day, but we're not just talking about how do you keep your body healthy with natural remedies, with herbs, with, holistic things, energy healing, of course, and the likes, but also the question of our time is, how do we keep sovereignty over our thoughts? For those who've been studying this field, with every technological advancement in the last 100+ years, a way was found to use that technology to influence us, and that's putting it mildly, or to take direct control over our thoughts, direct control, which is, this is what came out of the projects like MK Ultra, Project Monarch, and many others, where today we have such sophistication. And it's, of course, also the nanotechnology that's getting into our body, even if you didn't get the even if you're just living, because there's smart dust, nano dust. There are particles in every food. You can't escape that. There is none of us that are pure anymore. And blood samples, random blood samples, prove this over and over again. So we are already infused with nanotech, whether we made a conscious choice about it or not. However, that can still be mitigated. It can be still detoxed. It can still be changed. So we're now gathering this body of knowledge, and a sovereign community needs to have the knowledge of how to get rid of these intrusions and also how to protect themselves against them in the future. Because the future, it's not so much about, oh, we're just worried about somebody trying to come and get our land, or trying to, keep us from living this way physically. No, it's really more about the intrusion into our bodies, into our systems, into our sovereignty of thinking. So this is essential, because it will never last beyond our generation if we don't pay attention to this. And thankfully, like I said, people like Dr. Group's team, Ed Group, is doing this, and many others are really focusing on finding out what we have in our bodies, how is it affecting us, and how do we get rid of it, and how do we protect ourselves in the future. So, and that also, of course, includes emotional sovereignty, right? So it's also about learning how we become emotionally independent, how we become spiritually independent, how we, are in full possession of our faculties at all times. So all of this, incredibly important. The mastery of the nervous system, right? Most people have no idea, that we've been taught that we have this autonomous system inside of us that we can't influence. Like, the basic functions of our body, that heartbeat, hormonal production, brain functions, blood pressure, that we have no control over these things, that we can't access the autonomous nervous system and regulate it. And that's not true. We absolutely can. I could teach you in 5 minutes of practice to regulate your heartbeat, even increase it or decrease it very quickly. Not hard to do. And so we have this knowledge now. It's coming back, but we need to implement it. That needs to be learned. That needs to be remembered and taught. Very, very important. Bodily and mental sovereignty, essential, absolutely essential. Then, of course, and this is what most people get, productive land and resource control, right? You can't have sovereignty if you don't have land. I'm not saying you need to have hundreds and hundreds of acres, but the bare healthy minimum, and people can do it on less, but the ideal minimum is around 2.5 acres per family. That's the ideal minimum. Now, people can grow food on less. The question is, how long can they do it? Can the land regenerate? Can the soil regenerate over time? Livestock and those things. But if we are looking for the ideal minimum, it's 2.5 acres. And then we need to think about water access. It might not have to be on every single property. Maybe not every property needs a separate well. Ideally, yes, but the community needs water access, right? Of course, you need to start focusing on soil regeneration and learning. Our soil is depleted right now on average of 75% of the nutrients that would be in the soil, and the minerals and the bacteria and everything that is needed in the soil. So we're left with maybe 25%. So regeneration, rejuvenation, healing of the soil, very, very important. Then the proper way of growing food. The currently conventional model, even in small scale gardening, but especially in agriculture, is complete insanity. It's like complete morons got together and thought of the worst model to do it. And it's poisonous, it's toxic, it's destructive. It kills everything but that crop, and even that crop has to be so modified and so sprayed. So, but there's permaculture, which is the mimicking of how nature does it, right? And so in the permaculture, in the food forest fields, you basically mimic what nature does, and you plant it that way, and you focus on perennials, and you focus on guilds of plants and how they live together, and you look at how plants occur in nature and what other plants are close to them, and how do they symbiotically work together. And then you mimic that in your space, and you create that. So that's incredibly important. Of course, seed saving, seed optimization over the years. If you live this way and treat your gardens, your food forests this way, every year your seeds are going to get better. And interestingly enough, even the heavily modified seeds return to sort of their prime state again after a few generations. So this is just the beauty of regeneration in nature. There's a miraculous system in place here, folks. Energy independence is something that, people think about on a small scale level. Maybe I have solar backup, I have a generator backup, but think about long-term solutions that will make you power independent. I would suggest that most people today don't want to live without power. Some do, but if you do want to live with power, there are systems available. They're just not usually large-scale commercial. They're small operations, maybe a little obscure, but they are available beyond the commercial solar stuff. But something to be researched, something to be looked into, and then looking into what are solutions for a community where there's a lot of water, maybe a micro hydro plant. There's all kinds of things, but something to jot down, think about, plan for. Of course, the building materials, we have, our houses are toxic. The building is toxic. The paints are toxic. The glues are toxic. Everything that is used, all the chemicals, it's all toxic. It's insane. And so we don't even know how sick we have become because of the toxic materials that are being used. And so returning to traditional natural building structures, wood, natural insulation structures, like all of this is like incredibly important long term. And then also think about livestock pollinators, bees, butterflies, and there's other smaller pollinators who will still do some of that job, to bring that into your field and to cultivate that, right? This is all part of, the big thinking process here. Then we have something that again is overlooked in these communities so often, which is decentralized, non-digital exchange and value creation. So why non-digitized? Because there's almost no way to have your own little internet. I mean, you could build local networks, but ultimately they would run on something centralized. So my dream has always been, my dream has always been to bring back the ideas of local currencies or local means of exchange, if you will. The barter system is all right, but it's never going to really do well because, there might be a really good artist in the community that gives people food for their soul and paints and makes music, but that doesn't always, you can't always trade a song for meat or for food or whatever. These are just not systems that can really sustain a community long term. It can be a part of it, but I believe a local means of exchange. And why local? So when you have, let's just say you have some sort of paper that represents value in your local community, even if it is, for example, tied to the value of the euro or the dollar where you live, but it gives people a 5 to 10% advantage to use this local paper over any other currency, so it's a little cheaper for them, then they will shop wherever they can use it and that is accepted. And if that is a local community, then the value is kept in the community because you can't use it outside of it. So you're going to rather use it inside of it and use the advantages that it gives you. So I've always believed in that, and people simply aren't utilizing it enough. Some communities have it. I know there's a big one. There's a bigger community up in Vermont that's been doing it for a long time. There are those. There's some in Germany, but it hasn't really caught on, and I think it should. Really, really important. Of course, precious metals. If you have gold, silver, small denominations, that can work. That can be a means of exchange. Maybe a little impractical. I know they have the gold back now in certain states, which is a very thin sort of a paper gold. And many states have brought back gold and silver as legal currency, so you can use it. It's okay. It will be accepted. And of course, a community that looks at production over consumption and sort of also looks at an ecosystem where you go, do we need to endlessly produce more of this when there's more than enough? Do we need to shift and produce more of something else, which is communication, which is logistics and talking to each other, right? Very, very important. Right now we have a community. I mean, every little town has a dollar store, or maybe wherever you live, it's called something else, but it basically sells 70, 80, 90% completely useless crap for cheap, $1 or $1.50, simply because our economy needs to continue growing and it needs this kind of crap. In a sovereign community, those things are not needed. You start with the essentials and you work your way up into comforts and conveniences as much as you might need. And then defense, right? Again, a lot of spiritual communities they find out the hard way that this is necessary, that defense is, my goodness, there's no species on this earth that lives without defense. And people who are so blind and have such rose-colored glasses that they don't want to think about these things, they always fail. So it's about more than just guns, right? Because the sort of sovereign communities, they focus on land and guns and maybe a little bit of those Christian traditions, but not much less. And so physical defense, like firearms, martial arts training, early warning system, fortifications, it's just pure logic, folks, right? You want your community, or at least an essential part of your community, to be trained, to be ready, not violent, not aggressive, just defense. Like, really know what to do, how to do it, and focus maybe on techniques and more maybe even obscure arts that have bigger impact. I mean, there's energetic martial arts. You wouldn't believe, when you learn how to manipulate energy, how powerful that can be, and that it oftentimes is more powerful than any physical interaction could be. Just saying. Of course, firearms training should be a no-brainer, essential. I would suggest, that people, countries, nations, most nations unfortunately have allowed it, that their firearms and their right to firearms was taken away, they were robbed of it. Thankfully, this hasn't happened in America yet. It's happened in Canada recently. It happened in Australia. It happened in other countries. It's never a good sign. But if it isn't your standard firearm, there are other alternatives that still work and still, can help a lot. Then, of course, strategical alliances, wherever there's shared interests, there's shared defense interests, and you would. What this also shows us, and this is what experience shows us, when communities become more or less self-reliant, their physical condition tends to be much better than in mainstream society. You'll have very, very few obese people, very, very few. People will be physically in better shape, and everyone will have a reason to be trained. Everyone will have a reason, because this is your land. This is where you live. This is where your family lives. This is where your community is. This means something. This is real. Like, you attach to it in the best possible way, and you want to be able to defend it should the need arise. So these folks are much more inspired and motivated to become trained, to become proficient, to really know what needs to be done. Then there's information defense. It's like, how do we manage the infiltration of all the lies and the falsehoods into our community? This is a serious subject, because it borders on, well, do we give our children free access to the internet? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. We haven't done it with our children when they were growing up. I would never do that. But it is something that a community needs to discuss. How do we educate? How do we treat this? How do we make sure that there's discernment? How do we make sure that our children learn how to do that? And then, of course, there's a legal defense, right? That you will be in your own little sovereign community that functions on its own, but it will be part of some nation that claims authority or jurisdiction. So there need to be people. Everybody needs to have some proficiency, but then some people need to have significant and deep proficiency on how the law really works, what the law really is in common law, statutory law, commercial law, maritime law, all these things that apply, incredibly important. And a spiritual defense, which is how do we teach our children to build up their spiritual shield, their energetic defense system, right? This is something that's so rarely talked about, but we have taught our children, and we've done it ourselves. We taught them every time that they left our home, that they went outside into the world, we created an energetic shield around them, and we taught them to do the same. So when you go into a space where there's a lot of people, bubble up is what we call it. Bubble up. We still say bubble up. It's like create that energetic shield around you, which has a filtration system. Everything that is good, beneficial, and comes from goodwill with good intentions reaches me. Anything else stays outside. Does it always work perfectly? No, but it works really, really well, actually. And so we learn how to use our spiritual, energetic, and mental acuities again. Very, very important for free life. So you see that there's much more to the story than just how do we grow food, where do we get water, and land. And I want to get quickly back a little bit to the land story. So most people are caught up in the trap that they can't afford land, or just can't afford, right? That's a trap in and of itself. It's a good program that those who have controlled the means, the money systems, they want people to believe that. They want people to stay in that poverty mindset, in that lack mentality, when geez, the universe is infinitely abundant. But when it comes to stuff like land, you wouldn't believe that there are quite a few programs out there that can allow you to get land free or very, very cheap. Maybe not super desirable areas. Maybe you were an hour away from the next town or 40 minutes or whatever. But if multiple people get together, 10, 15 families maybe, and buy a bigger plot of land and just get started, that those are all possibilities to look into. I suggest that we are at this is the last this is the last stage where this is somewhat easier to do. This is the last window of opportunity. That window of opportunity is going to close in the next years, and from there on out, it's going to get more and more and more difficult by design to do that. Now, maybe there's an exception, and some country does something a little different, but on a big scale, compared to 20 years ago, it is harder today to get land or get sort of get these structures going, because everything has got more expensive. There's a bigger barrier. However, it is still possible very much. The longer that people wait by just procrastinating, or still hoping for some savior to arrive, or hoping that the system will change and magically the trillions of dollars of investments, will be forgotten and they will go into another direction, or the white hats will have fixed it, or whatever the fairy tales are. Well, you're in for a rude awakening. This systemic train, it's racing to the technocratic finish line, and like I've said many times before, it's not going to last. It's not going to last forever, for sure not, because people will eventually find themselves, in the system and realize what it is. But it's going to be there for a while, and it's going to just tighten the screws more and more and more. And it's doing it so much faster now, right? I mean, the UK just went from a PR standpoint. They just went from, oh, we need digital ID because of mass migration on boats, and to kind of get a grip on that, to, well, you're going to need it for everything. That was in a matter of weeks, right? Australia is already there. I'm not even talking about China and other countries. And every country has their own system that's being developed or already done. The European Union has it, and so forth. So, last but not least, people always say, Jean, with geoengineering and everything else, why would we even do that? They're just going to wipe us out. They're not going to allow it. They're going to come after us. Yes, probably you're right. They're going to try to do these things. And that's why I said, when we remember who we really are, we can create systems that are almost impenetrable even with sophisticated technologies. I'm not gonna on how this works on an open platform. I'm not talking about sophisticated weapons. I'm saying systems. There are systems that we can activate, coordinate, and use in ways to protect ourselves. And when we find this knowledge inside ourselves again, and we do it, you'd be surprised as to just how much they're going to leave us alone, because they're going to be scared of it. They're going to want it. They're going to be scared of it. Both of those things. And this is how people, by the way, and communities have been around for a very, very long time. And everybody that tries to mess with them has some experiences around that. And they just go, we're going to leave these folks alone. There's something going on there. And so, these are all possibilities. You just have to open your mind, open your being, and realize that what we're living now is a teeny tiny percentage of our true capabilities. And the more we tap into them, the better things get. So yeah, please like, share, let us know what your experiences are. Many of you are already building these structures, building your homestead. Please share with the community. They love to hear from others. They love reading comments. And let's focus on what we can do. And my personal motto to kill all excuses is do what you can with what you have where you are. Do what you can with what you have where you are. That's all. And once that is your motto, you will kill all excuses and you will take baby steps every single day, which is what we need to do right now and get started on. And for those of you who want to get, sort of some inspiration, a glimpse into our journey, my family's journey, Christine and I and our family, the animals, our homesteading journey, we talk about this. We share videos and we show the animals and what we're doing here on the farm at inspired.locals.com. That is our subscriber community. That's where we do a show called Farm Tales. We do Honey Talks there, which is Christine and I together. We do Coffee and Truth, where we talk about things that we never share here, or just that's not good in an open platform. So if that speaks to you, join us, please, on inspired.locals.com. It's a wonderful community where you can share videos, photos, stories, comment, connect with other people. Beautiful, beautiful, inspiring community. All right, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon. Christine and I would love to invite you into something really special. We started a new show on Locals called Farm Tales, where we share the real stories from our homestead, the animals, the garden, the beauty, and even the funny mishaps along the way. Just like all of our work, it's about living consciously in harmony with nature and creating a life of true freedom. Please click the link down below and join us for Farm Tales on Locals. We would love to see you there.